All right, so today we're going to talk about my preferred martini. This is a recipe, it's a riff off of a martini at the Atlas Bar in Singapore. Their version it follows closer to classic specs, that 5-to-1 ratio we've talked about before. I go a lot wetter than that. I do a 3-to-2 ratio. And their recipe calls for a splash of champagne vinegar. I don't use champagne vinegar. I actually go a little bit heavier on the orange bitters. So we'll talk a little bit about all the components. We're going to talk about the ratio, but I'm going to build it to, for you guys now. Basically, it's 3 parts of gin, 2 parts of the Blanc vermouth. Remember, we talked about that last time. It's that perfectly clear vermouth. It's semi-sweet, semi-dry wine. It's got the nice aroma. I'm using Dolan. I like Dolan. It's got a good flavor, but again, you can find any of the Blanc or Bianco vermouths. If you can find them, they are harder to find, but at the same time, if you go to a bigger liquor store, you'll usually find it. Like I said, most liquor stores will carry maybe a bottle of Martini de Rossi. Their Bianco is actually, it's pretty solid. So, but that's my preferred, and this is, like I said, this is my preferred recipe. The only place I've seen that carries, or I should say that showcases a martini with this vermouth is the Atlas Bar in Singapore. Not that I've been, but just recipes I find online when I'm, imagining of places I want to go to. Brief note on bitters. So bitters are basically seasoning for cocktails. Everything else we have, right? So when we have the martini is going to be spirit forward. It's going to be obviously botanicals from the gin, aromatics from the vermouth, hints of flavor coming from whatever garnish we use. I use lemon for this one, but for example, with the martinis we've made so far, we've used onions. We've made a Gibson with martinis with olives. We made a Gibson with the onion, the twist of citrus, just to give you that that pop of a freshness. But what's really going to drive that flavor, what's going to give you something a little bit more, is going to be bitters. For this cocktail, I use orange bitters. You could easily use grapefruit bitters. If you want something a little spicier, you could use aromatic bitters or pochard bitters. You could even use, now you have all sorts of crazy bitters. There's the walnut bitters, there's Mexican chocolate bitters, there's all sorts of different flavors that will give you, it's like salting your cocktail. It gives you a hint of flavor that you're not going to get from the cocktail by itself. Another note I wanted to talk about, I've gotten a few questions while I've been, it's been a brief journey so far, but I've actually gotten a lot of questions on my jigger and what are the exact recipes, because as I'm usually giving you guys, I kind of talk to ratios. I prefer talking to ratios. My jigger is a 2 ounce on one side and 1 on the other, but I also use, you'll see me every so often, I use a shot glass that it's a 1 ounce shot glass and it's got markings for the ½ ounce as well. I don't endorse any brand at this point in time, but I do say I built my bar kit myself. I bought an independent mixing glass. I bought a standalone Boston shaker. All the pieces I bought were separate just because I found most of the bar kits that you find online are all about aesthetic. The bar spoons are falling apart. The jigger themselves, you're going to see where the weld marks are. They don't have the markings on it, so you don't know what the measurements are. So I like buying independent pieces from restaurant supply stores, bar supply stores, just because I like the craftsmanship and the use. To me, it's more about use than the actual aesthetics. And then my girlfriend bought me the rack I have here just on Amazon, and it fits all my needs. But when I'm giving you guys the recipes, I like to give you guys the ratios just because I don't know what glassware you're using. I have a 5 ounce coupe that I use for most of my cocktails. But at the same time, I always have a little carafe that I'm going to use. Any overflow I have, anything beyond those 5 ounces is going to go into that little carafe. But at the same time, it's one of these where I prefer, instead of telling you guys every time I'm making a cocktail, it's going to be 5 ounces, 2.5 ounces of gin to ½ ounce of vermouth, or today it's going to be 3 ounces to 2 ounces. I like to say parts, because it doesn't matter if we're talking ounces, it doesn't matter if we're talking milliliters, it doesn't matter what we're talking about, even if you don't have an actual measuring cup. If you have just a regular shot glass, you're not sure what it is, you use 4 shots, 5 shots of that to 1 shot of, 4 shots of gin, 4 shots of vodka to 1 shot of vermouth, and that's still that same ratio that I've been telling you guys with all the recipes. Makes it easier to track. You don't have to worry about exact measurements. But I do think, like I said, the ratio is important because, especially with martinis, you want to have those exact ratios. You want to have those exact measurements, because when you eyeball it, you're not going to get the same balance that you get in a measured cocktail. So let's go ahead and start building this right now. Step 1, always ice. Put your glass to chill. So let me actually do that. I think I said on my first video, what you should do is have these in the freezer, but I live in an apartment, so I don't have the space for that. Maybe someday I will have a dedicated freezer just for my barware. And like I said, we're gonna be going with, today it's gin. This actually plays really well with vodka as well. When I'm in the mood for it, I'll do it with a vodka. Today, like I said, I'm just doing gin. Regular London dry, we're doing Gordon's. And like I said, it's gonna be a 3-to-2 ratio. So that's 2 ounces. That's 3 ounces total. I'm gonna put the cap. And now switch to the Blanc Vermouth. And like I said, I'm using Dolan's today, but you can use any one you want, whichever one works for you. And then this is my first cocktail for you guys, or my first martini for you guys, that I'm adding bitters for. Traditionally, these recipes are usually they're gonna call for 1-, 2-, but I learned early on that you don't have to follow those recipes. So you're having an old fashioned, you're having a Manhattan, you're having a martini, you can ask them to put in 6 hits of bitters, and it's gonna give you a brighter flavor. Today, I'm gonna actually just go with 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we're gonna stir that up. And I don't know if you guys can see it, I'm gonna hold it up in a second, but this started off with that perfect clear between the Dolan and the gin. This it was water basically. You could barely tell that it was anything other than a clear liquid. And then with the 4 hits or 5 hits of bitters that I just added, it gave it a little bit of a golden hue, but it's not that same golden hue we get when we make the traditional martinis with that dry vermouth. So we're nice and chilled there. I'm gonna get into the points in a second, but you definitely get the bitter at the back of the throat, the sweetness of the Blanc vermouth, very light. Usually, when I make this, I double up the recipe. So I'll pour 3 of the 2 ounce, so that gives me the 3 parts, and then 2 of the vermouth, but again, of the 2 ounce, but 2 different shots. So I have 2 martinis ready to go, and I'll have one of these little carafes, and I'll just pour one of my drinks in there, and I'll either stick it in the freezer so it stays chilled, or put it over a bowl of ice so it stays chilled. And that way I don't have to worry about going back and making myself my second drink while I'm enjoying my first. So now let's see if today I can actually peel the lemon a little bit better than I did last time. A little bit, not really though. All right, gotta work on this, guys, for you guys. All right, so let's see if I can actually express it. No, I got a little bit, not too much though. All right, so I'm just gonna pass it around and drop it in. Ideally, you're going to express the citrus and it's going to spray out the oils. You got a good piece, you squeeze it like that and it's fresh, it's going to spritz the oils all over the surface of the drink, which will be nice. Here, I got a little bit, but it's not going to be a great citrus overpowering, but it does give that citrus, that pop that you get from whenever you add citrus to a recipe. All right, so, and again, I don't know if you can see I think you can see it pretty well actually. It's ever so light hue of golden, but for the most part, it is almost clear. Oh, that is perfect. So when I tasted it off the spoon, I immediately got the bitter. And almost it was like, okay, well, maybe I might have overdone it. No. On the actual cocktail, you don't feel the bitter right up front. You get it at the end a little bit, but it does round out the flavor. So you have orange, you have lemon, you have citrus, you have the sweetness, like I said, from the dry vermouth. You get the botanicals, that juniper flavor from the Gordon's, and this is just perfect. This is refreshing. It's nice and chilled. So, you know, and like I said, that's, to me, the most important part with a martini is that it is cold. Yeah, I can't even say anything else about this. It's perfectly balanced. And what I mean by that is spirit-forward drinks they're hard on the palate. I'm not gonna lie. It's one of these where it's like, I love Negronis, all right? Negronis are one of my favorites, but I admit that it's not for everybody because it is a spirit-forward. It's a harsh, bitter flavor right up front. Martinis, not all martinis, you know, especially if they're not well made, you get slapped like you're just taking a shot of alcohol. Here, yes, it's pure alcohol. There's nothing in this that is not alcoholic with the exception of lemon. But, and we're talking lemon peel, we're not talking like any squeeze of anything. So this is, you know, 100% alcohol is in this liquid. But at the same time, it's one of these where you don't feel it. It goes down smooth. It doesn't kick you in the face. You know, it doesn't overwhelm your, the bouquet is not overly alcoholic. And it's something where I'm like, I can easily slug, you know, 3-4 of these down without a problem. Obviously there are problems, but you know, it's one of these where it's refreshing. It goes down smooth and it doesn't have any sort of, it doesn't, and I'm trying to think what the word is in English. It's, in Spanish, it's basically, it's repugnant. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't offend the senses that it's okay, it's too much of this, it's too much alcohol, it's too sweet, it's too bitter. No, it's none of that. It's perfectly balanced. It doesn't feel any sort of way as you're drinking it because, like I said, it is strong, but it doesn't overpower one sense or the other. It doesn't, you know, it's not too sweet, it's not too bitter, it's not too alcohol or overproof flavored, even though it is nothing but alcohol. And like I said, it's nice and cold, so that goes down smooth. The bitters, you don't have to go with so much bitters. I did 5 hits just now. When I do the double, I usually do 10 hits, you know, and again, obviously you're gonna scale that for your cocktail, but you don't have to. I usually go with a bitter heavy ratio when I'm making my drinks, just because I like them. But at the same time, for other people, I'll usually only double the ratio. So in other words, if it's 1 dash, I'll do 2 dashes, maybe 3 dashes, if I think they can handle it, just because I want those flavors to show through. I made a cocktail this past weekend. I was entertaining, and I actually made something just on the fly. And it was for 2 friends that I know are not big into the bitter. They've come to appreciate it knowing me, but at the same time, it's one of these where they're not big into those bitter forward drinks. And I actually made it with, it was basically 4 hits of bitters, but it was 2 hits of orange bitters and 2 hits of the Mexican chocolate bitters. And they loved it. It was the same thing. They said it was nice and balanced. It was spirit forward. It had a very nice finish, but it was one of these where it was basically a orange leaning cocktail. Best way I can describe it is I'll see if I actually make an episode for it, and I'll name it, make the specs, and it'll be my cocktail. But basically, it was the combination of the spiced chocolate, the orange liqueur, gave it a nice finish to this, otherwise potent drink. So, all right, guys, I'm gonna finish this off camera so I don't embarrass myself. But again, looking forward to this tomorrow, or next episode, I should say. It's not necessarily gonna be tomorrow, but next episode, I'm gonna show you guys a version of this that I order when I go out in public, just because, like I said before, not every bar carries a Blanc or Bianco Vermouth. Makes it hard to find. Not every bar carries orange bitters. And just because they don't have it doesn't mean I have to skip out on this cocktail when I'm in public. Obviously, it's one of these things where I'm going to say it on the next episode as well. I said it on my first episode. Don't go up to a bartender assuming that they don't know how to make the drink. Don't go, and force feed your my specs in this case, or your specs if you start playing around with these cocktails. But at the same time, you are paying for the cocktail. Don't, if they're busy. In fact, if you see that the bar is busy, don't even ask for martini. But if you have an opportunity, you can talk to the bartender, be like, hey, listen, would you mind making me a cocktail? And these are my specs. This is what I'm looking for. 3 parts, 2 parts. If they have orange bitters, orange bitters. If they don't have, you can kind of play around with it. Like I said, I'm going to show you guys that recipe tomorrow or whenever I make the next episode. But in the meantime, as always, cheers. Enjoy the rest of your night. And yeah, look forward to the next time. Thanks.